Hi, welcome to this ERStudio how-to session. In this one, we're going to talk about the compare and merge utility. Let's now have a look at a demonstration of the compare and merge capability. To do that, we're going to start by creating a data model by reverse engineering, and this will actually create both a logical and physical model representing a project. We're then going to use compare and merge to actually take objects from an existing logical model, which we could be using as a template model, and that already exists and is stored within our repository. And we're going to use compare and merge to combine several of those objects into the new model we create. And then from this new model, we're going to actually generate an alter or change script from that updated model to enable us to execute those changes into the data asset itself. And then finally, we'll just show how that could be published using the Team Server capability to access it via just a web browser interface. This is ERStudio Data Architect, and we're going to start with a blank or empty data model. In order to create a new data model, we're going to use the reverse engineering capability. So this enables me to connect to an existing data source. So I'm just going to type in the password and database name. I then get a list of the objects from that database, which could be tables, views, triggers, procedures, and this might vary dependent upon the actual underlying database platform that we're connecting to. I then have several other options where I can choose specifically the object names that I want to bring into the data model. Again, some further options that I can select, and then we can go ahead, click the finish button, and we'll generate a new data model. Now this has generated both a logical and a physical model. And if we look on the left hand side here, I'm just going to compact some of these down. So I have a logical model with a number of entities defined, and I have a physical model again with tables and columns defined. So these have all been read from the existing database or data asset, which in my case was a Microsoft SQL Server database. Already stored within my ERStudio repository, I have an enterprise logical model, and this has got a number of objects already predefined that I may want to use or reuse within this newly created data model. So you can think of that almost as a template. So in order to do that, I'm going to select my model. I'm going to right click, compare and merge. Yes, let's go ahead. I get a number of options, but I'm going to say, let's compare against a model. I get a number of options, but I'm going to say, let's compare against a repository-based data model, which is this option here. I then browse to my repository, and I've got a number of different data models that are stored here. I've got some which require what's called upgrading, and this is because they're from previous versions. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and select my corporate logical data model. I've done this before, so it's just going to overwrite the temporary file. That's fine. We're going to compare what's called the main model. This is not a very large data model, so I'll keep everything selected. And now what you'll see here is on the left-hand side, I have a list of the tables from my newly created logical data model, along with a list of the entities from my existing enterprise logical data model. And I'm going to select all of those. It's not a very large data model. Now, here, what I'm seeing is on the left-hand side, the current data model that we reverse engineered. So this has got about half a dozen or so entities defined. Now on the right-hand side, a list of entities that are defined within the enterprise logical model. And at the moment, they don't exist. At the moment, they don't exist. And at the moment, the entities only exist in one model or the other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select several of the entities from my enterprise logical model, because what I want to do is bring some of these ones that are predefined and for the demonstration it doesn't really matter what we're going to bring in. We're going to bring in 3 entities, so we'll keep our existing objects that we reverse engineered, and then we'll merge into those 3 entities from the enterprise logical model that's already predefined within my ERStudio repository. And I'll go ahead and do that. So what we should see happen now is this data model that we're looking at will now be updated. And if I just change the layout to, we could have a circular layout, we could have a hierarchical layout, whatever makes most sense really. We'll maybe stick with circular. So you'll see it now has the 3 new objects which will be imported from that enterprise logical data model. Now that's just synchronized those objects into my logical data model. So in fact, if I look at my physical model and redo the layout here, you'll see they don't exist. And at the logical layer, we have our new objects of contractor, department, employee, but they don't exist in my physical model. So what I'm now going to do is use compare and merge again. So compare and merge is a really useful and really powerful utility in ERStudio. And this time, I'm going to select the option to compare against another modeling file. So I'm going to take my newly created logical objects that we've just imported in. I then get to see all of these. So what I could do here, if this was a much larger model, we could in fact we could leave those on. That's really not going to make any difference. And we'll see here that on the left hand side, my logical model now contains those new entities, but they don't exist as tables in my physical model. So what I'm going to do now is say I'd like to merge from my logical into my physical model. So let's go ahead and do that. And now if we look at my physical model, and again we'll apply that layout, we now have those additional tables have been brought in to the physical model. So just to be clear, these are the entities and objects we reverse engineered and created the initial model. We then connected to our existing data model from our repository, brought in these additional objects as template objects, and combined them in to a single physical model. And again, compare and merge, really powerful utility. We can use it again now. And I could actually say, well, let's have a look at the differences between that physical data model that we now have and the actual data asset. So this is my SQL Server database that actually exists in a SQL Server instance. So I'm just going to go through and click next, 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 and that's all going to be fine for us here. And you'll see on the left hand side our model has these extra objects. I can go ahead and it's telling me now that in my physical data model I've got these new objects, which are 3 new tables. They don't exist yet within my actual data asset. So I could then go ahead and say, well, let's go ahead and merge from the data model into the table inside the database itself. And I'm going to click the finish button. Again, I've done this previously, so it's just telling me it's going to overwrite my temp file, and it's going to load it in. So it's now actually used compare and merge to take the contents of that data model, compare it to the actual database itself in my SQL Server instance, and generate a SQL script to synchronize them back so they match again. So here I'll see my new table called CNR with the columns in there, my table called depth for department, again with my columns, and so on, with a little bit of error checking and so on in there. And I could then take this SQL code, I could load it into my preferred DBA or ops environment, deploy it into my test configurations, and once I'm happy with that, I could then push that through into an implementation to update the database or data asset itself. So what we've seen here is a short demonstration explaining how we can utilize compare and merge within ERStudio. We explained how this can be really useful and really powerful to allow us to actually compare differences which might exist between data models that we created and the actual data model stored in the repository, to allow us to merge and reuse those enterprise-wide definitions that we may already have in place as a template. And then from there we use compare and merge again to look at the differences between logical and physical models, then physical to the database or the data asset, and generate a change and merge script to actually synchronize the database, synchronize the tables back into the data model. And just as a quick refresher, this is how that all looks inside the ERStudio Data Architect client application. So the main screenshot there is of ERStudio itself with a simple model similar to what we actually produced, though it's got a few more tables. And now we're running the compare and merge utility, where we can see the screenshot on the right hand side, and we're using that to actually be able to generate a DDL script. And I didn't run it in the demonstration, but we can also generate reports on differences and so on from within the wizard itself. So thanks for watching our short ERStudio how-to demonstration. Hopefully this has given you a good idea as to how we can utilize compare and merge, how it can be very useful, very powerful, and also how we can easily use it within the tool for a number of different use cases. Thank you.